But make no mistake about it, it was not accidental. It occurred through the form of a wink. It occurred by taking enforcement of immigration to one law enforcement agency, ICE, not funding it, and having a wink that if you could get here, you would have a job, you would have a license, you would be welcome, and you would also come at a very, very low wage. Welcome to Motivational Mondays, a conversation with David Ibarra, and my guest today is Mark Wheatley. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you so much, David. Thank you for having me.
Well, Mark, we're going to jump right into your past responsibilities that just came to an end. You were a state legislator for Utah for 20 plus years?
20 years.
20 years. Well, I'd like to know a little bit about that experience.
Well, first of all, it's been a privilege and an honor. I remember the first year that I was elected, I was going up State Street on that hill, and I thought to myself, I'm just a young guy at the time that was raised in Central City, and I'm now at the Capitol.
Wow.
And so that for me was a big deal.
As you drive up State Street, and I remember as a youngster that State Street is so straight that as you enter the valley and you look at the end, you see our state capitol. So driving up to enter it, that had to be an emotional feeling.
It really was. It really was. It hit me home, and I started to think of my mother, and who was always with me during my political experience, and it was very moving.
Tell me, what did your family think when they saw you get sworn in to the state legislature?
Well, they were very proud. It was at the time that the state capitol was being renovated. So we were in a building that is now the Rebecca Lockhart, which is the West building. And it was a makeshift area. And I had my mother there, my sister, my brother, and of course my beautiful wife, Josie. And it was a great experience, very humbling.
Well, you know, you and I know each other from background, but we didn't in our youth really know each other, although we knew a lot of people in the same crowd. But to this day, I still remember the first time that I met you and your wife, Josie Valdez, and it was at the Market Street Grill, or the Oyster Bar, to be specific.
Right.
And seeing a young, energetic couple that enjoyed being out, and I could tell liked each other.
Absolutely. We've been married for 39 years.
Wow.
I've known Josie for about 42, and it's been nothing but a ride.
Perfect.
Yeah, you know Josie, and she's full of energy.
That's
from sun up to sundown.
Understated. Well, tell me about your experience in holding office. What were some of the highlights? What were some of the low points?
Well, the highlights are when you have some important legislation that you're trying to get passed, and you're able to do that, accomplish that. For example, I had a bill that had to do with inmates. And a lot of the inmates that are in the prison, when they get out, they have to go to work and pay for any restitution that they own. But in this case, there were fines and fees that were being accumulated while they were in prison. So not only did they have the restitution to pay, but they experienced fines and fees and interest for the number of years that they were in there, because they were not able to pay off the...
It's kind of like an IRS bill.
Absolutely. You could never get out from under it. And so we were able to pass a bill that for every dollar that the former inmate paid, 75% would go towards their fines and fees till it eventually became a zero balance. And so that was a big accomplishment, several accomplishments. I was able to get a $1 million for an organization called it was what was the name of it? It was Al-Anon.
Oh, yes, absolutely. The Al-Anon is for individuals experiencing substance abuse.
Yes,
and
yes.
While I was general manager of Henry Day, I made it a point of having a program with Al-Anon that we would bring one individual experiencing that difficulty in to our work team, and the team responsible to help show a different lifestyle. Great group. Tell me more.
Well, we were able to, the place where they were receiving education and treatment and classes was an old LDS church building. And they had referrals from all over. But they needed to have some updates. Otherwise, they were going to demolish the building. And so the $1 million was able to get them to take care of some of the things that they needed to take care of. And they're still moving forward. They're still got a bigger clientele than they had before, which is kind of sad because we need to make sure that people have an opportunity and be able to address some of those substance abuse issues.
I oftentimes looked at it that in business sometimes we look at things a little differently than, certainly public leadership would look. It seems to me that some of the money that we spend on homelessness, drug addiction, that the individual directors, we should have a program that if you ran out of work, you were heavily compensated, because the goal would be to have no work, not to be paid by the head count of the individual experiencing the work, which then ends up making it the homelessness industry complex, and it's an approach that I'm hoping can get looked at, that we can bonus people for helping people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, tell me, how is it to get a bill passed when, if I'm not mistaken, and I know I'm not, you're a Democrat?
I'm a Democrat. It can be difficult, very difficult, depending on the type of legislation you're trying to get passed. But when you do, it's always working across the aisle. Because right now, and I don't think the numbers have changed, there's 105 legislators, 75 in the House, 29 in the Senate, and you need 38 to pass a bill. And so you always have to have
the average number of Democrats that are in office in that 100 mix would be,
well, in the House it's 61-14, and in the Senate it's 6 Democrats
out of
23.
23. Okay.
23.
Yeah. Well, you're going to have to get along with
Absolutely.
the folks on the other aisle. But, problem solving really isn't about being a Democrat or a Republican if we do it right.
Right. Absolutely. You have to do it right, because you want all dedicated individuals and entities to be involved, and you want them to be able to support the bill that you're trying to pass. Because in the long run, it's going to benefit the people of the community.
It's interesting, Mark, and when you begin to talk and you can get past the labels and the team politics that currently exist right now, and we've got to work through that somehow, but when you can get past it and actually prepared to talk about the problem, instead of pointing fingers of who owns the problem or telling people the obvious, but when you really get in, roll up your sleeves and start problem solving, it's interesting that people start to participate from both sides of the aisle.
Absolutely.
And we forget who's a Republican and who's a Democrat. Problems don't know the difference. They are just waiting for leaders to lead.
Absolutely. That's 100% correct. Now, I do like to point out that national politics is a lot different than state politics here in the state of Utah. We, in my opinion, work better together. We don't always agree, but that's kind of anticipated. But we're able to remain friends, but yet attack the issues that are on hand, or not support the legislation that you feel that will be a detriment to your community.
Well, I'm not known to be a quiet individual about my opinions concerning politics.
Yes.
But I will tell you this, is that I agree with you when it comes to the state of Utah and the United States of America. We're different. Absolutely. And it's not and being the number one or two economic successful state in the 50, almost for the last 20 years, that's not an accident.
No.
But I will say is we have 2 or 3 Democratic representatives that are barkers, and you just got to shut them off and know that they'll get tired. And we have 3 or 4 or 5 Republican barkers that you can't get into a conversation with them because both of those groups are so negative driven that they are hurtful in their conversations about any topic. But it's interesting, and the folks are well known by name,
right.
and other legislators will say, "Oh, we just let it wind down," and then we get together, and we still have the vast majority, that will talk to each other.
Right. Absolutely 100% correct. We're there to resolve problems. We're there to create successes for our communities. And the only way to do that is to get participation from both sides and the governor and others that are directly involved.
Tell me, what were some of the low points?
Well, some of the low points, and they're kind of rising to the top again now, are the issues of immigration. During 2008 and for a period of about 3 years, it became very contentious, to the point that the speaker then was Speaker Lockhart. She didn't want to hear any more immigration bills. She said she had it, because of various reasons. But we were able to close that door and move forward and be able to protect the families that were here, and especially the DACA recipients, right, who are phenomenal in every sense of the word, who go to school, they have to maintain a job, they have to maintain classes. I know some that have their master's degree. I know a couple that have their law degree. Just phenomenal individuals.
Several that are physicians now?
Absolutely, and they contribute to our community in more ways than one. They're success stories, and that's what I like to see. I like to see success stories.
Right. Well, in discussing that, sometimes it's been a low point in that some folks don't get the depth of what a life means, and that the United States of America has been a melting pot of immigrants. There's only one group that aren't immigrants, and I like to remind our settling members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I've often teased that they were the first group of illegal immigrants, in that they came to Utah when the first 2 years of their existence here, it was part of Mexico.
Right, absolutely. Absolutely.
I honestly believe, Mark, that in the next 5 years to 10 years, we're going to address this. And most people in business get that our immigration problem isn't a problem between the United States and Mexico, because if we were to deport every individual that was here undocumented, our economy would certainly shut down, building would shut down, restaurants would shut down. But how did it happen is another conversation that we could spend hours on. But make no mistake about it, it was not accidental. It occurred through the form of a wink. It occurred by taking enforcement of immigration to one law enforcement agency, ICE, not funding it, and having a wink that if you could get here, you would have a job, you would have a license, you would be welcome, and you would also come at a very, very low wage.
Right.
And as we look at Tyson's Foods and we look at the hotel entities, we look at it, it wasn't a problem until 9/11.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, everything changed. And we'll find our way back. I'm sure of it.
Well, you know, some of the biggest allies that came forth during this debate, 2008, 2009, were the farmers. Mm-hmm. Farmers who, I remember this one representative, probably one of the most conservative in the legislature. So I can't get my kids to work the farms. I can't get relatives.
Right.
And it's just not my family. It's all the farmers. And who comes and works hard and shows up every day are the immigrants that work the farms. They have such pride in the work that they do.
Imagine if you could have learned the Live Ready lessons as a child. Now imagine your children learning these principles through engaging stories, sing-along songs, themed games, and more, all designed over many years with real educators. With Yes Our Kids Can, this dream becomes a reality. Don't miss this chance to shape your child's path to extraordinary success. Enroll in Yes Our Kids Can today and be sure to give your child a successful tomorrow.
The comments you've just made remind me of a 15-year-old boy by the name of Francisco Ibarra, who came to this country, 15, Mark, to work in Spanish Fork, Utah. My father picking fruit. Later, he was undocumented, but his contribution as a veteran in the Army, his contribution as a business owner, his contribution in raising two boys to be proud of work. Dad had 2-3 jobs, and he was so proud of being a provider.
Right.
And then again, my brother going on and being the senior advisor to a president of the United States. What country has those kinds of success stories?
Incredible.
We've
Absolutely
got a lot to be
incredible.
proud of, all of us in the United States of America. And we've got to remember those kids that were brought here and have lived here since they were 2 years old.
Right.
We've got to find a way
Yes.
to assist in inviting them to be here because they add something to our countries.
Yes, absolutely. They add a lot of taxes to our economy that they'll never see, if we send them back.
Well, the Bar Foundation, which I've put 144 kids through college, meaning graduating, and we don't look at immigration status. So a lot of our kids are DACA students, and we just put we're paying for 15 right now.
Wow.
And I tell you what, there's nothing that makes me feel more gratification than seeing a young person with hope.
Absolutely.
With hope.
Absolutely. That's what you want from our youth. You want to have them move forward, have the hope, and contribute to this great society that we live in.
And for us,
Yes.
I mean, I'm in the last quarter of my life, and you want to feel like the next generation. It's going to be better than
Yes.
it was during our time as being the steward of the assets and the talent development of our society. I want to shift. Let's go back to the very beginning. Mark Wheatley, Salt Lake City, growing up. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, my mother is not from Utah.
Mm-hmm.
She's from Costilla County in Colorado,
Mm-hmm.
and where her family has been for generations. And during the World War II, where most of the men, or a lot of the men, were fighting across the Atlantic.
Right.
They had women go take over some of those jobs that the men used to do. And she went to Seattle and worked in the shipping yards. And then she also went to California. And then her father passed away, my grandfather. And so she was coming back through Utah with her friend, and she met my father. And on the way back, going back to California, they visited, they struck up a relationship, got married. Unfortunately, they were divorced when I was 3.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know too much about that side of the family, the Wheatley side of the family. I know my grandfather, I'd see him occasionally once in a while.
Right.
They were immigrants. But my mother raised 4 children, hardworking. As a matter of fact, I think she may have known your father.
Wow.
She went to beauty school with your good friend, B. Sanchez.
Wow.
And
Well, then they were there at the same time.
absolutely, yeah.
Wow.
And you know what I find amazing? She was always involved in different organizations while she was working. And she was still able to afford a house, buy a house, which I don't think you can do that today.
Right.
It's a lot harder than it was. I'm sure it was extremely hard at the time. But I grew up in Central City. My mother didn't drive, so we always took the bus wherever we needed to go. And so I pretty much stayed in the confines. But in the confines that I lived in, you go to somebody's house, a friend, family would be speaking Greek. You go to another friend, they'd be speaking Navajo. You go to another friend, the family spoke Italian. I remember the Hashimoto's. The grandparents lived in the back of the house, spoke Japanese. And a good friend of mine, Dennis Sorrell, who family was from Germany, and he ended up making a career in the military. And what helped him go through the military, which is very diverse, was growing up in that neighborhood.
Right.
It was a very good neighborhood. You had to be tough to be in that neighborhood if you wanted to survive.
I remember some of your friends, which we'll keep those on private conversations.
Absolutely.
Because they were my friends too.
Yes, I've had a couple of conversations with you. But it was a great place to grow up. We played sports at the local school grounds. I loved baseball. We'd always meet there to play baseball. The only time my mother knew, the only time I knew it was time to go home when it was time to eat. Mm-hmm. You could get your hands cut or anything else. You'd still be playing. Mm-hmm. But you knew if it was time to eat, you had to be home.
Yeah.
So it was a great place to grow up.
So it was a good place. If America embraced the diversity that is natural to it, what kind of global interaction could we be? Because we are the most natural prepared to economically be a leader in a now global economy. It is not just the borders of our country. It can't be anymore.
Yeah. We're, as you mentioned earlier, we're a nation of immigrants.
Right.
And we all come from someplace. And most of the individuals like yourself, my mother's family, their relatives are indigenous. And so there's ties to the indigenous population. And so if we can do that without being so afraid, because I think that's what causes a lot of discrimination and people not knowing people. And every family, they love their parents. They love their family. They have just the same functions as anybody else.
Mark, if all of us could concentrate on the one common thing that I have never found that divides us, the love of our children.
Yes.
The milestones that we could achieve.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about you graduate from college, I believe at the University of Utah?
Westminster,
well, a little higher level. And you end up having a career at?
Why, I worked at a few places. I worked at in the private sector with it was U.S. West Communications. I worked in sales, and then I went to Salt Lake Community College.
Yes.
And I spent about 16, 17 years there. But I also worked in nonprofits. When I was a young man, I wanted to work really bad. So, I'd take dishwashing jobs. I remember I went to see relatives in Wyoming so I could work. I was a busboy. And then my sister worked for an organization called Utah Native American Consortium. And she said, Mark, they're looking for somebody to work there on a temporary basis. Well, I went there and I applied and I was hired. Well, after 3 years, it was obviously not temporary, but I remember working there, and the first day of work, the director closed down the center, and he said, "We're going to go picket." And I said, "Well, I've never picketed." I mean, I thought to myself.
Right.
And what we were marching up and down the street was a group of indigenous who were farm workers that were being mistreated. So we went down to Midvale and we're picketing, and within a couple of days, the issue was resolved.
Right.
And it was a tremendous experience. I was able to do an internship with Utah Legal Services as a paralegal. And from there, I met some incredible women that were just so dedicated to providing legal services for those individuals of low income. Matter of fact, one individual, her name is Judy Billings, Lucy Billings, and she went to the Bronx Legal Center, and now she's a Supreme Court justice with New York.
Wow. Very
so,
cool. Well, it's interesting. My interest in politics occurred at about the age of 15, watching the situation in the farm labor movement, Cesar Chavez, and for whatever reason, what caught my eye more was Dolores Huerta.
Yes.
And seeing Bobby Kennedy go support the grape boycott, which was trying to get some just better standard of living for the farm workers while they were here, and then watching Martin Luther King, and then just watching this movement, and that's what caught me, was that Dolores Huerta, Bobby Kennedy, Martin Luther King, and I can never forget getting up early one day when Bobby Kennedy was coming. He was campaigning for president of the United States, and I went 3 hours so I could be on the front row, standing right next to the stage, and look up at him give his speech.
Wow.
And get an opportunity to shake his hand.
That's incredible.
And those, taking the extra effort that we can learn from some of our mentors.
Yes.
But the thing that I really am impressed with you, Mark, You take the extra effort, and I've never seen you mean. I've never seen you loud. I've never seen you angry. You're quiet, and everyone knows that you work and you get it done. And if you would consider and keeping the conversation going. So you have a natural leadership capability that many can't manage their emotions the way that you can.
Well, I thank you. I appreciate that. And I try my best. We all get upset.
Sure.
But you can ask Josie about that. Maybe you don't want to. But, when you're out there in public and you're serving and representing the people, they want solutions. They're full of emotion depending on the issue, and they want solutions to the issue that they're facing. And I'm not going to be very successful if I start pounding my fist on the table or yelling. That's not going to accomplish anything.
You're right. Let me ask you one last question before we end. The legislature is about ready to go into session. How do you feel about not having to drive up that hill?
Well, you know what? It's kind of bittersweet. I mean, I really enjoyed participating in the legislative process, but it's time for somebody else to take the reins and move forward. And there's always new issues, new problems to solve. And if I can be of support in one way or another, I'll be there.
Well, Mark, I want to thank you for your level of service. I also have a gift for you today for being on our program, a copy of my new book, Live Ready, Beyond Think and Grow Rich. Thank you very much for being on the program today.
Thank you, David. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Great. Thanks.